The stars look different out here. Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her face against the cool metal of the observation window and watched the distant suns flicker like candles in the darkness. She had been in space for 3 months now, but the sight still made her heart race with wonder. "Dr. Vasquez, we are approaching the target location," came a voice from behind her. Elena turned to see Zalthor, one of the Zephyrian crew members. His crystal body caught the light from the ship's panels and threw rainbows across the walls. When he spoke, his voice made a soft ringing sound that reminded Elena of wind chimes. "Thank you, Zalthor. I'll be right there," Elena said. She took one last look at the stars and then walked toward the bridge of the exploration ship Concordia. The bridge was busy with activity. 3 different alien species worked side by side at various control stations. Elena still found it amazing that she was here, working with beings from across the galaxy. Just 5 years ago, humanity had made first contact with alien life. Now she was part of the first joint research team to explore the unknown regions of space. Captain Thekva, a Kethmari warrior, stood at the center of the bridge. Her insect-like body was covered in dark green armor, and her 4 arms moved quickly across different control panels. Elena had learned not to judge the Kethmari by their scary appearance. Despite looking like giant praying mantises, they were incredibly smart and loyal friends. "The object is just ahead," Captain Thekva said without turning around. "It matches the energy signature from the ancient star charts, but it is much larger than we expected." Elena walked to the main viewing screen and gasped. Floating in the Yao void before them was a massive ship, but it was unlike anything she had ever seen. The vessel was dark and twisted with strange curves that seemed to bend light around them. It looked ancient, as if it had been drifting through space for millions of years. "By the flowing streams," whispered Vorthan, one of the energy beings, that served as the ship's navigation specialist. Vorthan appeared as a glowing blue mist that roughly held the shape of a person. "That vessel predates all known civilizations. The energy patterns are unlike anything in our databases." Elena felt her excitement growing. As humanity's top expert on ancient alien cultures, she had spent her whole life studying the mysteries of vanished civilizations. This ship could hold answers to questions that had puzzled scientists for decades. "Can we get closer?" Elena asked. "Captain." Thekva's antenna twitched, which Elena had learned meant she was thinking hard. "The ship appears to be dead, but I am detecting some kind of low-level energy field around it. We should be careful." "I agree with Captain Thekva," said Professor Kilmoth, the lead Zephyrian scientist. His crystal form pulsed with soft light as he spoke. "Our scans show the ship's structure is still intact, but the materials are unknown. The design suggests a technology far beyond anything we have encountered." Elena moved closer to the viewing screen. The mysterious ship seemed to call to her somehow. She could see what looked like docking ports along its hull, and strange symbols carved into the metal that glowed with a faint blue light. "I think it's some kind of library ship," Elena said. "Look at those symbols. They're not random decorations. They form patterns like writing or mathematical formulas." "A library ship?" Captain Thekva's 4 eyes focused on Elena. "What makes you think that?" "The design," Elena explained. "Most warships are built for speed and weapons. Most colony ships are built for carrying people and supplies, but this ship has these huge empty spaces in the center, perfect for storing information. And those symbols all over the hull, they're like advertisements telling anyone who finds the ship what's inside." Vorthan's glowing form moved closer to the screen. "If Dr. Vasquez is correct, this could be the discovery of the century. Ancient knowledge from a civilization that existed before any of our species reached the stars. The question is, how do we get inside?" Professor Kilmoth asked. "Our scans cannot penetrate the hull, and we have no idea how their technology works." Elena studied the ship for several minutes. Something about its design felt familiar, though she couldn't explain why. It was as if the ship was built to be found, to be explored. The docking ports were clearly marked, and the symbols seemed to be providing instructions. "I think I can figure it out," Elena said, "but I'll need to get closer. Much closer." "Captain." Thekva made a clicking sound with her mouth parts, which Elena knew meant she was worried. That could be dangerous. We do not know what kind of defenses this ship might have. I don't think it has weapons, Elena said. Look at the design again. Everything about this ship says it was built to share knowledge, not to fight. The beings who made this wanted other species to find it and learn from it. But why? Asked Vorthon. Why would any civilization leave their knowledge floating in space for strangers to find? Elena had wondered the same thing. In her experience, most species guarded their secrets carefully, but this ship was different. Everything about it suggested its builders had wanted to teach, to share what they had learned. Maybe they were dying, Elena said quietly. Maybe they knew their time was ending, and this was their way of making sure their knowledge wouldn't die with them. The bridge fell silent as everyone considered this possibility. Elena could feel the weight of history pressing down on them. If she was right, they were looking at the last gift of a vanished civilization. All right, Captain Thekva said finally. We will dock with the vessel, but we go in carefully, and we stay in constant contact. If anything seems wrong, we leave immediately. Elena nodded, but inside she felt a strange pull toward the ancient ship. Something was waiting for her in there. Something important. She didn't know what it was, but she knew she had to find out. As the Concordia moved closer to the mysterious vessel, Elena pressed her hand against the viewing screen. The symbols on the ship's hull seemed to pulse brighter, as if responding to her presence. For just a moment, she could have sworn she heard something calling her name across the empty void of space. She was about to make the greatest discovery of her life. She was also about to die. The ancient ship's docking bay was huge and empty. Elena's footsteps echoed in the darkness as she walked beside Captain Thekva and Professor Killmoth. Their helmet lights cut through the black air, showing walls covered in more of those strange, glowing symbols. The atmosphere is breathable. Vorthon's voice crackled through their communication system from the Concordia. But the air is very old, be careful. Elena pulled off her helmet and took a deep breath. The air tasted metallic and cold, like breathing inside an ancient tomb. But she could breathe, which meant whoever built this ship had lungs similar to humans. The symbols are clearer now, Professor Killmoth said. His crystal body was glowing brighter in the darkness, creating dancing lights on the walls. They appear to be directional markers pointing toward the center of the ship. Captain Thekva held her weapon ready as they moved deeper into the vessel. I do not like this place. It feels wrong, too quiet, too empty. Elena understood what the captain meant. The ship felt like it was waiting for something. Every step they took seemed to wake up more symbols on the walls. The blue glow grew brighter as they walked toward the ship's center. They reached a massive circular room with a high ceiling that disappeared into darkness above them. In the center of the room stood a pillar of black metal, covered in crystal panels. The panels pulsed with the same blue light as the symbols, but brighter and faster. It looks like some kind of computer, Elena said. She walked closer to the pillar, feeling drawn to it like a magnet. The crystal panels might be data, storage devices. Do not touch anything yet, Captain Thekva warned. We should scan it first, make sure it is safe. But Elena was already moving toward the pillar. Something about it called to her. She could feel energy coming from the crystals, almost like they were alive. Without thinking, she reached out her hand. Elena, wait! Professor Killmoth shouted. The moment Elena's fingers touched the crystal surface, everything changed. Blue light exploded through the room like lightning. Elena felt electricity racing through her body, but it didn't hurt. Instead, it felt like waking up from a long sleep. Images flooded her mind. She saw the builders of this ship, tall beings that looked almost human, but with skin that glowed like starlight. She saw their civilization, beautiful cities that floated among the stars. She saw their knowledge, millions of years of learning and discovery, and then she saw their end, a great darkness coming from somewhere beyond the galaxy, swallowing stars and planets. The builders knew they could not fight it, so they put all their knowledge into ships like this one and sent them across space, hoping that someday other beings would find them and learn. But the visions came too fast, too powerful. Elena felt her mind stretching, trying to hold more information than any human brain was meant to contain. The blue light grew brighter and brighter until it filled the entire room. "Elena!" Captain Thekva was shouting, but her voice sounded far away. Elena's body began to shake. The energy from the crystal was too much. She could feel her heart stopping, her brain shutting down. The last thing she saw was Captain Thekva and Professor Killmoth running toward her before everything went black. Elena was floating in darkness. She could not feel her body, could not hear any sounds. For a moment she thought she was dead. Then she realized she could still think, which meant some part of her was still alive. A voice spoke in the darkness, but not with words. It spoke directly into her mind, warm and ancient and kind. "You are the first to successfully connect with our memory banks," the voice said. "Your species shows great promise." "Who are you?" Elena thought back. "We were called the Architects. We built the first civilizations, learned the first great truths about the universe. We are your ancestors, many times removed, but still connected through the great chain of evolution." Elena felt shocked. "You're human?" "We were long ago, before we transcended physical form, before we became something more. We left these ships as tests for our descendants, waiting for the day when they would be ready to inherit our knowledge." "But I'm dying," Elena thought. "The connection is too strong." "Death is only another doorway," the voice replied. "But you do not need to walk through it yet. We have changed you, made you a bridge between what was and what will be. You can return to your friends, but you will not be the same." Elena felt energy flowing through her, rebuilding her body, changing it in ways she could not understand. What am I becoming? What humanity was always meant to become. A species that can exist in multiple dimensions at once, that can touch the quantum reality where all knowledge exists. You are the first, but you will not be the last. The darkness began to fade. Elena felt herself being pulled back toward her body, back toward life, but she was bringing something with her, something that would change everything. Back in the ancient ship, Captain Thekva was holding Elena's lifeless body. Her heart had stopped beating 37 minutes ago. Professor Killmoth had tried everything, but there was no brain activity, no life signs at all. "We need to get back to the ship," Captain Thekva said sadly. "Prepare her body for transport. Her family will want to." Elena's eyes opened. They were the same brown color as before, but now they had flecks of blue light in them, like tiny stars. She sat up slowly, looking around the room as if seeing it for the first time. "Elena?" Professor Killmoth's crystal body was flashing with surprise. "But you were dead. Your heart stopped. Your brain showed no activity." Elena smiled, but it was different now. She looked older somehow, wiser. "I was somewhere else for a while. I learned things, important things." She stood up easily, as if she had not just died and come back to life. When she looked at Captain Thekva, she spoke in perfect Kethmari language. "You're afraid of what happened to your homeworld, the plague that killed your younger brother. You joined the exploration service to run away from that pain." Captain Thekva stepped backward. "How could you know that? I never told anyone about my brother." Elena turned to Professor Killmoth and spoke in the singing tones of the Zephyrian language. "And you're here because your people think you're too curious, too willing to ask dangerous questions. They sent you away because they were afraid of what you might discover." Professor Killmoth's crystal body dimmed with shock. "That information is classified. There is no way you could know it." Elena looked around the ancient room one more time. The crystal pillar was dark now, its energy spent. She had taken everything it had to give, absorbed the knowledge of an entire civilization. "I know many things now," she said quietly, "and humanity is about to change forever." She walked toward the exit, moving with a grace she had never possessed before. Captain Thekva and Professor Killmoth followed, both frightened by what Elena had become. Behind them, the ancient ship began to collapse. Its purpose was finished. The test was complete. Elena Vasquez had died and returned, but the woman walking back to the Concordia was something new, something that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of what it meant to be human. Elena sat in the medical bay of the Concordia, while Dr. Yethan, the ship's Vorthan healer, ran test after test on her body, the energy being moved around her like a glowing cloud, using instruments that scanned every part of her from head to toe. "This is impossible," Dr. Yethan said, his voice sounding like wind through metal pipes. "According to every test I have run, you died. Your brain was without oxygen for 37 minutes. No living being can survive that, especially not a human." Elena watched the test results appear on the screen above her. Her heart rate was normal, her brain activity was normal, but there were strange new patterns mixed in with the regular ones. Tiny blue lights flickered in her neural pathways, matching the color of the energy from the ancient ship. "I feel fine," Elena said. "Better than fine, actually. I feel like I can understand things I never understood before." Captain Thekva stood in the corner of the room, her forearms crossed. She had not taken her eyes off Elena since they returned from the ancient ship. "You spoke our languages perfectly. You knew things about us that no human should know. What happened to you in there?" Elena closed her eyes and tried to organize the flood of memories that had filled her mind during those 37 minutes. It was like trying to hold an ocean in a cup. "I met them, the builders of the ship. They called themselves the architects." Professor Kilmoth's crystal body pulsed with interest. "What did they look like? What did they tell you?" "They looked like us," Elena said quietly. "Like humans, but older, more evolved. They had skin that glowed with inner light, and their eyes held the wisdom of millions of years." "That cannot be right," Dr. Yethan said. "Humans have only been in space for a few years. Your species is young compared to the rest of us." Elena opened her eyes and looked directly at the Vorthan healer. Through her new sight, she could see his energy patterns, the way his consciousness flowed like water through dimensions. "That's what I thought too, but I was wrong. We were all wrong." She stood up from the medical table and walked to the center of the room. Everyone moved back, slightly as if afraid to get too close to her. "The architects were human," Elena said, "but they lived millions of years ago when your species were still learning to make fire. They were the first civilization in this galaxy, maybe in the universe. They discovered how to travel between stars, how to bend space and time, how to live forever." "Impossible," Captain Thekva said. "The oldest known civilization is the Meltari dynasty, and they only existed 50,000 years ago." Elena shook her head. "The architects existed long before that. They watched your species grow and develop. They watched all of us take our first steps into space. But they never interfered, never made contact. They were waiting." "Waiting for what?" Professor Kilmoth asked. "For their descendants to catch up. For humans to develop enough to understand what they really were." Elena walked to the viewing window and looked out at the stars. "The architects discovered something that the rest of us never learned. Humans are different from every other species in the galaxy." Dr. Yethan moved closer, his energy form crackling with curiosity. "Different how?" Elena turned back to face them. "Every other species thinks in straight lines. Zephyrians process information through harmony and sound. Kethamari think through tactics and strategy. Vorthans understand energy and flow. But humans think in contradictions." "Contradictions?" Captain Thekva's antenna twitched with confusion. "We can hold two opposite ideas in our minds at the same time and believe both of them," Elena explained. "We can love someone and hate them. We can be logical and emotional at the same moment. We can see something that should be impossible and decide, it's possible anyway." Professor Kilmoth's crystal body dimmed as he processed this information. "But that sounds like a flaw, not an advantage." Elena smiled, and for a moment her eyes flashed with blue light. "That's what makes it so powerful. The universe itself works on contradictions. Light is both a wave and a particle. Time moves forward, but can be bent backward. Matter and energy are the same thing but behave differently." She raised her hand and small sparks of blue energy danced between her fingers. The architects learned to use these contradictions. They could exist in multiple dimensions at once, think thoughts that were both true and false, live and die at the same time. It made them the most powerful beings in the universe. But why did they disappear? Dr. Yethan asked. If they were so powerful, what happened to them? Elena's expression grew sad. They evolved beyond the need for physical bodies. They became pure consciousness existing in the spaces between reality. But before they left, they scattered these test ships across the galaxy. They were waiting for humans to find them and prove they were ready for the next step. Ready for what next step? Captain Thekva asked, though she sounded like she didn't want to know the answer. To become what the architects became, to inherit their power and their knowledge. Elena looked at each of them in turn. I'm just the first. The connection I made with their ship has awakened something in human DNA. Other humans across the galaxy are going to start changing too. The room fell silent. Elena could see the fear in their faces, feel the worry radiating from their minds. She understood why they were scared. The balance of power in the galaxy was about to shift completely. You have to understand, Elena said, gently. This isn't about humans becoming better than everyone else. It's about humans becoming what they were always meant to be. The architects designed us to be bridges between different types of consciousness. We're supposed to help other species evolve too. Help them evolve how? Professor Kilmoth asked. Elena walked to the center of the room again. As she moved, the air around her seemed to shimmer with possibility. By teaching them to think in contradictions, by showing them how to exist in multiple states at once, by helping them break free from the limitations of linear thinking. She touched Professor Kilmoth's crystal surface, and suddenly his body blazed with new colors. For just a moment, he could feel what Elena felt, see the universe as she saw it. The experience lasted only seconds, but it changed him forever. By the flowing harmonies, Professor Kilmoth whispered, I could see the connections between everything, the way sound and light and thought are all the same thing expressed differently. Elena nodded. That's just the beginning. Imagine if every species could think that way. Imagine the problems we could solve, the discoveries we could make, the peace we could build. But Captain Thekva was backing toward the door. Or imagine the chaos. If humans can read our thoughts, know our secrets, manipulate our minds, what's to stop them from controlling us all? Elena felt the captain's fear like a physical weight in the room. She realized that not everyone would see humanity's evolution as a good thing. Some would see it as a threat that needed to be stopped. I would never hurt you, Elena said. None of us would. The architects taught me that power without compassion is meaningless. We're not meant to rule over other species. We're meant to help them become the best versions of themselves. But she could see in their faces that her words weren't enough. The galaxy was about to learn that humans were far more than they appeared to be, and not everyone would be happy about that discovery. Outside the medical bay, alarms began to sound. Vorthon's voice echoed through the ship's communication system. We are receiving emergency signals from human colonies across the sector. Multiple reports of humans displaying impossible abilities. The Galactic Council is demanding immediate explanations. Elena closed her eyes and felt the awakening happening across space. Millions of humans were changing just as she had changed. The evolution had begun, and there was no way to stop it. The galaxy would never be the same. The Galactic Council chamber was the largest room Elena had ever seen. Representatives from hundreds of species sat in curved rows that stretched up toward a domed ceiling covered in stars. The air hummed with translation devices as dozens of different languages mixed together into one confused noise. Elena stood in the center of the chamber, surrounded by guards from 6 different species. Their weapons were pointed at her, but she wasn't afraid. She could feel their emotions, understand their fears. They were scared of what she represented, scared of change they couldn't control. High above her, Chancellor Mordeth of the Zephyrian Council spoke in his ringing crystal voice. Dr. Elena Vasquez, you stand accused of being a threat to galactic security. Reports from across known space tell of humans developing dangerous abilities. You will explain what has happened to your species." Elena looked up at the Chancellor, seeing not just his physical form but the patterns of sound and light that made up his consciousness. "I've already explained to the preliminary investigators. My people are evolving. We're becoming what we were always meant to be." Becoming. "Weapons," hissed Ambassador Kreltak, a reptilian being from the Outer Rim territories. "Human traitors are reading minds, stealing our business secrets. Human diplomats are manipulating negotiations with abilities we cannot understand. Human scientists are making discoveries that should take decades of research." Elena shook her head. "They're not stealing or manipulating. They're finally able to see connections that were always there. They're solving problems by thinking in ways your species can't." From the Kethamari section, General Vextor stood up on her 4 legs. "Yesterday, a human cargo pilot named Marcus Chen single-handedly resolved a trade dispute that has lasted 3 years between the Gornari and the Helix Collective. He somehow understood both species' cultural needs better than their own ambassadors. That is not natural evolution. That is dangerous mental intrusion." Elena felt a moment of pride. Marcus. Chen was one of her former students, a good man who had always been curious about alien cultures. Now he could truly understand them. He didn't intrude on anyone's mind, he simply saw past the surface arguments to the real needs underneath. That's what humans do now. We see the truth that exists between the contradictions. Chancellor Mordeth's crystal body flashed with alarm. "And what gives you the right to see these truths? What gives humans the authority to understand our deepest thoughts and fears?" "The same thing that gave you the right to form this council," Elena replied. "Evolution, growth, the natural development of consciousness. You weren't always crystal beings who could process sound into thought. The Kethmari weren't always tactical masters. The Vorthans weren't always energy entities. You all evolved to become what you are now. But we evolved slowly, over millions of years," said Counselor Yithra from the Vorthan delegation. "Your species is changing in days, sometimes hours. That kind of rapid evolution is unnatural. It suggests outside interference." Elena smiled. "You're right, there was outside interference. From our own ancestors, the architects. They built the test ships and scattered them across the galaxy, waiting for us to find them and prove we were ready." The chamber erupted in noise as hundreds of species began talking at once. Elena could hear fear, anger, and disbelief in dozens of different languages. She raised her hand, and somehow her gesture cut through all the chaos. The room fell silent. "I know you're afraid," Elena said, her voice carrying clearly to every corner of the vast chamber. "I can feel your fear like a cold wind. You think humans are going to use these new abilities to control you, to make you slaves or pets. But that's not what's happening." She turned slowly, making eye contact with representatives from different species. Right now, across the galaxy, humans are helping. Dr. Sarah Kim on New Geneva just solved the crystal plague that was killing Zephyrian children. She saw the connection between your crystal biology and quantum resonance that your own doctors couldn't find. Engineer Tom Bradley on Station 7 figured out how to repair Kethmari breeding chambers using techniques that combine your technology with Vorthon energy manipulation. "Those are isolated incidents," General Vextor said. "What about the larger picture? What happens when all humans have these abilities? What happens to the balance of power?" Elena felt the weight of the question. It was the same fear Captain Thekva had expressed, the same worry she saw in the faces around her. "The balance changes," she admitted. "But not in the way you think." She walked closer to the center of the speaking area. As she moved, the air around her seemed to shimmer with possibility. "The architects showed me something during my transformation. They showed me the future they saw for the galaxy. Not humans ruling over everyone else, but all species working together in ways we never imagined possible." "Pretty words," said Ambassador Keltak. "But how do we know humans won't use their powers for conquest? How do we know you won't decide we're inferior and need to be controlled?" Elena stopped walking and looked directly at the reptilian ambassador. Through her enhanced perception, she could see his memories, his fears. Because that's not who we are. You're afraid because your own species was conquered once, centuries ago. You spent generations as slaves to the hegemony empire. You know what it's like to be powerless. Ambassador Kreltak recoiled as if he had been struck. How did you? That information is classified at the highest levels. I'm not reading your mind, Elena explained gently. I'm seeing the patterns in your energy field, the way your consciousness has been shaped by your experiences. Every species carries the history of their traumas and triumphs in their quantum signature. Now I can read those signatures. Chancellor Mordeth's crystal form pulsed with agitation. This proves our point exactly. You have abilities that violate our privacy, our autonomy. How can we coexist with beings who can see our deepest secrets? Elena felt frustration building in her chest. They weren't understanding what she was trying to tell them. Because we don't want to violate your privacy. We want to understand you so we can help you heal from old wounds and grow beyond your limitations. She closed her eyes and reached out with her consciousness, touching the minds of every being in the chamber. For just a moment, she let them feel what she felt when she looked at them. Not judgment or superiority, but compassion, love, a deep desire to see them become the best versions of themselves. The effect was immediate. Several representatives gasped. Others began to weep. A few fell to their knees, overwhelmed by the pure emotion Elena was sharing. This is what humans see when we look at you, Elena said, opening her eyes. Not enemies to be conquered or subjects to be ruled. We see family. We see potential. We see the beautiful, unique consciousness that each of your species brings to the galaxy. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then Counselor Yithra spoke, her energy form flickering with new colors. I felt peace. For the first time since the energy wars, I felt true peace. But not everyone was convinced. General Vextor's weapons were still raised. Feelings can be manipulated. Emotions can be faked. How do we know this isn't just another form of control? Before Elena could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the station. A voice echoed through the chamber's communication system. Emergency alert. Unknown vessels approaching from the galactic rim. Configuration and technology. Unknown. All military forces to battle stations. Elena felt her blood turn cold. Through her connection to the quantum field, she could sense the approaching ships. They felt wrong somehow, empty of the life patterns she had learned to read. Whatever was coming, it wasn't alive in any way she understood. Chancellor Mordeth was receiving reports through his crystal communication array. Long-range scans show massive vessels of unknown origin. They appear to be harvesting systems, stripping planets of all matter and energy. Elena closed her eyes and reached out with her enhanced senses, trying to understand what was approaching. What she found made her gasp with horror. It's the darkness, she whispered. The same force that destroyed the architect's civilization millions of years ago. Somehow it's found our galaxy. The chamber erupted in panic. Representatives were shouting questions, demanding explanations, calling for their fleets. But Elena barely heard them. She was remembering the visions the architects had shown her, the great consuming darkness that had driven them to transcend physical existence. Now it was coming for them all, and humanity's evolution might be the only thing that could stop it. The enemy ships were like nothing anyone had ever seen. They moved through space like living shadows, absorbing light and energy from everything they touched. As they passed through star systems, planets went dark. Entire civilizations simply vanished, consumed by machines that turned matter into more of themselves. Elena stood on the bridge of the Galactic Council's flagship, watching the destruction through the main viewing screen. Around her, military leaders from dozens of species argued about strategy, but their weapons were useless against an enemy that could eat energy itself. Our plasma cannons have no effect, reported Admiral Zekthon, a massive Gornari warrior. The enemy vessels absorb our attacks and use the energy to grow larger. Kinetic weapons also fail, added Commander Hive 7 from the Silicon Collective. The ships seem to exist partially outside normal space. Physical projectiles pass through them without causing damage. Elena felt the panic growing among the fleet commanders. Every strategy they tried failed. Every weapon they fired only made the enemy stronger. Through her enhanced senses, she could feel the dark ships approaching like a cold tide that would wash over everything. Chancellor Mordeth's crystal form flickered with desperation. Dr. Vasquez, you said these entities destroyed the architects. How did your ancestors fight them? Elena closed her eyes and reached back into the memories the architects had shared with her. She saw their final battles, their desperate attempts to stop the consuming darkness. They didn't fight them, she said quietly. They couldn't. The Devourers exist in multiple dimensions at once. They consume not just matter and energy, but the very concept of existence itself. Then how did the architects survive? Demanded General Vextor. They didn't survive, Elena replied. They transcended. They gave up their physical forms and became pure consciousness, existing in the spaces between reality where the Devourers couldn't reach them. The bridge fell silent as everyone processed this information. Finally, Admiral Zekthon spoke. Are you suggesting we should all abandon our bodies and become ghosts? That is not survival. That is death by another name. Elena shook her head. The architects chose transcendence because they thought it was the only way. But they were wrong. There is another path. She turned to face the assembled leaders, her eyes flickering with blue light. The architects were only one species, even though they were very advanced. But we have something they never had. We have dozens of species working together, each with their own unique way of understanding reality. What does that matter against an enemy that can consume entire star systems? Asked Counselor Ythra. Elena walked to the center of the bridge. As she moved, the air around her began to shimmer with possibility. It matters because the Devourers can only consume things that exist in normal reality. But consciousness, true. Consciousness exists in the quantum realm where multiple realities overlap. She raised her hands and streams of blue energy began to flow between her fingers. The architects taught me to access that realm, to think in contradictions and exist in multiple states at once. But I'm just one person. Imagine what we could do if entire species learned to think that way. Professor Killmoth, who had been quiet, until now suddenly pulsed with understanding. You want to teach us all to become like you, to evolve as humans are evolving. Not like humans, Elena corrected. Like yourselves, but more than you are now. Zephyrians who can process harmony across multiple dimensions. Kethmari who can see tactical solutions that exist in parallel realities. Vorthons who can manipulate energy in ways that transcend physical laws. Chancellor Mordeth's crystal body rang with a sound like breaking glass. That is impossible. Species cannot evolve that quickly. It took millions of years for us to become what we are. Elena smiled, and for a moment her entire body glowed with inner light. The architects left more than just one test ship. They scattered thousands of them across the galaxy, each one designed to awaken the evolutionary potential in different types of consciousness. She gestured toward the viewing screen where more dark ships were appearing at the edge of the system. Right now, those ships are calling to their counterparts throughout known space. Every species that finds them and passes the test will gain the ability to exist partially outside normal reality. But the test killed you, Captain Thekva said. She had arrived with Elena, but had remained silent until now. How can we ask others to risk death? Because death isn't the end, Elena replied. I learned that during my 37 minutes in the void. Consciousness continues beyond physical existence, but more importantly, I've learned how to share the transformation safely. She walked to Professor Killmoth and placed her hand on his crystal surface. Blue light flowed between them and suddenly his body blazed with new colors. This time, instead of just experiencing Elena's expanded consciousness for a moment, he felt his own awareness stretching, growing, becoming something more. I can see the connections, Professor Killmoth whispered. Not just between sounds and harmonics, but between thoughts and realities, between what is and what could be. Elena nodded and moved to Captain Thekva. The Kethmari warrior stepped back, but Elena's eyes were gentle. "Trust me," she said. When Elena touched the captain's armored shoulder, Thekva's 4 eyes went wide. Suddenly she could see strategies that existed across multiple timelines, tactical solutions that used probability itself as a weapon. One by one, Elena touched each being on the bridge, sharing the gift the architects had given her. Each transformation was different, shaped by the unique consciousness of each species, but the result was the same. They all became more than they had been before. "Now," Elena said, turning back to the viewing screen, "we can fight them." The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Ships that could exist in multiple dimensions at once, weapons that fired probability rather than energy, strategies that turned the Devourer's own nature against them. The Zephyrians created harmony fields that existed across parallel realities, confusing the Devourer's ability to locate targets. The Kethamari developed tactics that attacked from directions that didn't exist in normal space. The Vorthons learned to manipulate energy in ways that violated the laws of physics the Devourers relied on, but it was the humans who provided the key breakthrough. Elena and her transformed colleagues realized that the Devourers weren't truly alive. They were echoes, shadows left behind when the original universe was consumed billions of years ago. They existed only by consuming new realities, but they couldn't adapt to anything that existed in contradiction to their nature. So humanity taught the galaxy to be contradictory, to exist and not exist at the same time, to be there and not there, alive and beyond life, real and impossible all at once. The Devourers couldn't consume what they couldn't understand, and they couldn't understand consciousness that refused to follow the rules of linear existence. The war lasted 3 days. When it was over, the dark ships simply stopped. They hung in space like empty shells, their consuming darkness finally extinguished. 5 years later, Elena stood in a classroom on New Geneva, watching students from 20 different species learn to expand their consciousness. The Academy for Quantum Consciousness Development had campuses on hundreds of worlds now, teaching beings to transcend the limitations of their original evolution. Not everyone chose to transform. Some species preferred to remain as they were, and that was fine. But those who wanted to grow, to become more than they had ever imagined possible, found teachers ready to help them. Elena looked out the window at the stars, knowing that somewhere, out there, the architects watched and approved. Humanity had passed their final test not by becoming gods, but by becoming teachers. Not by transcending beyond the physical realm, but by helping everyone transcend together. The galaxy was no longer the same collection of separate species competing for resources and territory. It had become a family, each member unique but connected, growing together toward a future none of them could have imagined alone. Elena smiled and turned back to her students. There was still so much to teach, so much to learn, so much growing left to do. And for the first time in millions of years, the universe itself was learning too.